the last couple of weeks, I've been, through the influence of the two closest people to me, I've been trying to get my head around the spiritual teachings and concepts surrounding what I perceive to be ideas rooted in the yogic philosophy of there being a very distinct difference between self, mind, and body. And I've struggled. I'll be completely honest. I found it difficult. I found it very, very difficult. I was somewhat raised on the idea, for lack of a better term, that our mind, my mind, is a control unit, a motherboard, a computer that operates the body. The body is kind of the hardware and the mind is the software. And that was an idea that served me personally and that I had worked with and worked on since its inception in my thought process. That being as young as 15, I believe I was. So it was tumultuous, to say the least, trying to wrap my head around this idea that this computer software that I'd been working so hard to perfect, this sword that I had been sharpening on a daily basis, was no longer me. And this whole time I was working on something that was separate to myself. Naturally, it being so long that I had thought something different, it has been, it still is, proven extremely hard for me to get my head around. However, it has led me to reconnect with what has served me for the past 10 plus years. And that being the idea that I am quite closely connected to my mind. And my mind is a sword that I can either sharpen or batter against a tree and blunt, and therefore either make it more useful or make it less useful based on the way in which I treat it, the way in which I practice with it, which, as I'm saying it now, in many ways does kind of separate you from your mind, right? The mind is a sword, it's a weapon. It's an object almost that, in my way of thinking, has been separate from myself. I myself have chosen to approach it and use it in a specific way. It hasn't done it itself, right? So it's left me at a little bit of a crossroads, but at the same time with a lot of curiosity and a lot of questions in many ways. Because I find myself here asking, right, well then, if I am not as closely tied with my mind as I thought I was, and my mind isn't the object or weapon that I thought it was, but a system that operates whether I choose it to or not, then who am I? That was the scary part, right? Who am I? However, as I sit here and talk about it, it is kind of starting to make sense to me in many ways. And there are more parallels than I realized prior to this very conversation I'm having with myself, that it's the same idea, just packaged differently. And I'm grateful for this experience. I'm grateful for this confusion because it's led me back to what brought me here. It's led me back to the very beginnings of my studies, and has led me to reopen a book that I haven't opened since I was 18 years old. And that book is in many ways the cornerstone of my thought process. It's a very frowned upon book. It's written by a very polarizing man. However, the teachings in said book I was able to connect with whilst staying disconnected to the negative things you could say that surround the teachings. That book being Dianetics, written by L. Ron Hubbard. That is a book that has served me since I was 18 years old. Its teachings still live on in my mind and thought process to this day. I still find myself not necessarily quoting, but living by and reminding myself of things that I had learned from that book and using its teachings to keep me moving forward on a daily basis. And it's brought me there. It's brought me back full circle. I haven't given up on the yogic idea of you are not your body and you are not your mind. And that self is very separate from that. And the idea is to truly live in self rather than in your mind or in your body. However, in my experience, the thing that has brought me closest to that is Dianetics and the teachings that are found in L. Ron Hubbard's work. So I'm kind of excited. I'm really excited, to be completely honest, to reopen that book. It's a book that my best friend and I have spoken about opening for a very, very long time now. And we've both discussed the fact that it's probably not far off. Us needing to open the book again is probably not far off. And it just so happens that here I am. Here I find myself, funnily enough, after being led to the yogic ideas from him. So yeah, man, it's interesting. I'm excited. I'm very excited. But more than anything, like, I feel centered again. I feel aligned again, because it left me in a state of confusion. I'll be completely honest. I was left pretty confused trying to wrap my head around these spiritual ideals. It was leaving me in a fairly consistent state of confusion, which I didn't like. And it wasn't until one night I had one conversation with my partner that I quite literally broke free of that. And within myself kind of said that shit, but didn't at the same time, because I'm still extremely curious. I can't throw it away, because in the small amount of time that I was attempting to wrap my head around it, it served me. It really did serve me. So I can't give up on it. I will never give up on it. However, we find ourselves having gone full circle, and here we are. And I'm excited because it's also come at a time where I'm about to embark on a slightly different way of training than I've ever trained before. So I'll be using the body in a way I've never used it before, and I'll be using the mind to remember, relearn, rekindle a spark that I once had, reconnect with ideas that I learned a long, long time ago, and maybe iron out some inefficiencies in my use of those ideas, develop a greater understanding of it, so on and so forth. So yeah, man, I'm excited. I look forward to seeing what comes of it. But if you made this far, thank you very, very much. It ended up being a little bit of a ramble, a little bit of a figuring out session today, which I haven't done in a long time. It felt nice. So thank you for being here for it. Thank you for listening to it. I appreciate it more than you can imagine. And as you well know by now, I shall see you tomorrow.